Hey there, welcome to LSAT Demon Daily. I'm Ben Olson, that's Nathan Fox. Together we're the founders of LSATdemon.com and our weekly podcast, Thinking LSAT. Today we have an email from Nicole.
It says, "Hi, Ben and Nathan. Thank you for being straight to the point and including Canadian law school related content!" Exclamation point. All right, so Nicole must be a Canadian.
Okay.
Listening to your podcasts has helped me improve my mindset toward the exam and focus on careful reading above all else. After a summer of studying with Princeton Review on 4-section practice tests, I kept scoring in the high 140s. All I can say is, what a waste of time and money. I wish I had discovered you guys sooner! Exclamation point. I plan to sign up for an LSAT Demon account shortly! Exclamation point. I've started my studies again, this time with no timeline to reach my goal score. Boy, I like the sound of that.
Yeah, that does sound good. I got distracted by the 4-section practice test. Is she saying that Princeton Review is still stuck on the old?
Who knows?
That would be interesting.
Well, either that or they're given an experimental section, which would make sense. But
that would make sense.
Yeah. Anyway, all these classes out there, they're always built toward a test date.
Yeah.
And I knew that was wrong at the beginning of my business. I knew that was wrong. But people still would ask me, like, well, what test is that class for?
Yeah. It was hard to get away from, right? It's like,
right.
That's how people came to us. They said, okay, well, I want to take this test. What class should I take for that? And it's kind of like, well, this class would end before that test, but the reality is you're probably going to go longer. And by the way, you have access to our materials for time after the class is over, precisely because I expect that. So maybe you're going to be taking the next test anyway.
Yeah. I feel, Nicole, I mean, I hate to say I feel Princeton Review, but I kind of do. Like if you're doing a live in-person 3-month class or whatever, then it kind of does. It's like people are going to want to sign up for it because it ends right before the June test. Although less so now, right? Because now the test is offered 9 times a year anyway. So we don't really, there's no point shooting for a particular test. To be clear, like some people take 6 weeks and they're fully prepared. Some people take 6 months and they're not yet prepared. So we don't really know how long it's going to take you. And you should be just working on like chipping away at it. Do a little bit every day and wait until your practice test scores indicate that you're ready to take the test. That's when you should sign up.
Yeah. And although people do take 6 weeks, it certainly wouldn't be my plan. That was the struggle that we always had, right? It was like, if you're going into a Princeton Review class and it's 2 months and it ends right before the official test, I wouldn't say, okay, well, great. It's all going to work out.
Right. But I wouldn't do the opposite either. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like some people, they've read online that you have to have a 4 or 6 month LSAT study program.
Yeah.
And we have somebody, she was just
300 hours, right? Or whatever.
Yeah, fuck that. If that's not necessary, that's not necessary. Like don't do shit. Don't punish yourself.
Yeah.
We have somebody in our classes right now who last week I was talking to her in class and she's like, oh, I started 2 weeks ago and I scored 170 on my practice test today. And it's like, okay, cool. Like that's somebody who just keep working at it, but you're basically ready. I mean, you're gonna be ready very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
You're taking to the test. You're a good reader. You're a careful reader. The questions are making sense to you. That's because they make sense. You got it. Like and so for somebody like that, it's like, yeah, great. We've got you for probably 1 month of the LSAT Demon live. Mm-hmm. She's going to pay us a total of $295 and she's going to be fully prepared for the LSAT.
Yeah.
And maybe knock it out of the park on her first attempt. Of course, she should plan for retakes if necessary. But, that's somebody who, like, the timeline would have failed her in the opposite direction.
Sure.
Right? Because I think, sometimes students come to me and they're like, well, so I'm planning on taking the test in August. But I scored 170 on my most recent practice test. And I'm like, whoa, August. I mean,
how are you going to fill that time? Like,
you got a few chances between now and then. Like, why wouldn't you be shooting for these other? Anyway. Yeah. Okay. Back to Nicole.
Sure.
When I decide to take practice tests again, after building a better foundation. I don't like that question. Should I be using 3 or 4 sections to calculate my LSAT score?
Okay, well, it's
because I used a previous 4-section exam I took with Princeton Review and scored in the high 140s. And then I eliminated one of the 3 sections. And then I used the 3-section score conversion program for raw scores on the power score. Just do your tests in the Demon and you won't have to do any of this. So don't even worry about it.
Yeah, the Demon gives you 2 choices. You can either take a 3-section test or you can take a 4-section test. But if you take a 4-section test, one of those sections will be experimental. You won't know which one it is, of course. And the Demon will exclude that section from your final raw score and thus your LSAT score. So just let the Demon do it. Yep.
Yeah. So just right. Nicole, come study with us. This podcast is not supposed to be a commercial for the Demon, but we're going to help you a lot. And your conversion, she says, when I converted it from 3 sections to 4 sections, or from 4 sections to 3 sections, my score increased to the mid 160s instead of the 140s.
I don't think something's not right there.
Yeah, that's like, no, sorry, Nicole, that's called an error in the conversion. That's not like the scores are exactly the same on 3 sections and 4 sections. So something went wrong there. Whatever you did, don't do that. Do the questions, do the tests in the Demon. The thing I don't like that Nicole said, that I think the lesson really here, she said, when I decide to take practice tests again after building a better foundation. And I want to be clear, Nicole, practice tests are part of the construction process. The purpose of taking practice tests is to build a foundation. So don't separate those 2 things.
Well, yeah, the way to build a better foundation is to do one question and learn from it. And a practice test is just a bunch of questions. So, yeah, You don't need to do them every day or even once a week. You could do them every other week, but they contain official LSAT questions, and you do them and then you learn from them. That's how you build a better foundation.
The purpose of doing it is to digest, you're going to chew on and digest more LSAT material. You're going to do one question at a time. You're going to chew on it. You're going to solve it. You're going to answer it correctly. You're going to move on to the next. You're going to miss a couple in that process, not too many, just a couple. And then you're going to thoroughly review those mistakes after you're done. That's why you do practice tests, not to just see what your score is on the 120 to 180 scale, but to get more experience doing timed sections and just doing more LSAT stuff. So, by the way, you can do 1 section today, 1 section tomorrow, 1 section the next day, and then let the Demon calculate your score. That's really probably what you should be doing, the bulk of your practice tests. You can also mix in, as Ben said, 1 practice test every other week, like where you do all 4 sections in a row. Something like that would be plenty, maybe even too much, huh? One a month might be enough.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a function of where you're scoring, right? The lower you're scoring, the more you should probably just focus on individual 35-minute sections so you have the stamina and the focus to review them. The higher you're scoring, the fewer questions you're getting wrong, and the easier it is for you to review. So the more practice tests you can fit into your life.
Yeah. That student that I mentioned earlier, the one who's, already scoring 170 after 2 weeks of prep.
Yep.
That student could do a practice 2 tests a week, maybe.
Yep.
Because you're going to sit down, you're going to solve basically all the questions. I mean, if you get a 170, you've only missed 6 or 7 questions, maybe.
Yeah.
And so then you're going to review those 6 or 7 questions, but that's a solid day or 2 worth of work. Total, including the review, and then you're ready to do another practice test if you like. Of course, you also don't have to, because you can just do a section.
Need. Yeah, you could do sections or even drilling. Right. Like some of this is dependent on your personal schedule. Like how much time do you have right now? Do you have 35 minutes? Really, an hour to do a section? Do you have 3 hours to do a test and review?
What do you think about 3 or 4 section tests for Nicole? Do you care whether students do or don't mix in the experimental section?
No, I don't care, but I think it can be helpful to do a 4-section test sometime before your official test. Just get a sense of like, okay, 2 sections, break, 2 sections. This is what it's like.
And if you find yourself thinking about it a lot, then maybe you should do it more. Because ultimately the goal, you shouldn't be thinking about the experimental section. Mm-hmm. People like just obsess over it.
Yeah.
It's like the first thing they talk to me about, they get done with their official test and they, illegally, they're not supposed to talk about the official test, but they do anyway. Immediately, as soon as the official test is over, they're sending me emails about like, well, I just really hope that the second section was experimental. And I'm like, what? The experimental section doesn't count. And you did 4 sections. You did your best on all of them. I like this just obsession with thinking about the experimental section. Mm-hmm. It cannot possibly be productive, right? It's one of these things where there's like no upside and there's only downside to it.
Yeah.
People need to stop thinking about it.
Yeah. To be clear, if you do a 4-section test in the Demon, one of those is an experimental, you're still doing an official section and you're still getting graded on it. It just doesn't affect your LSAT score. So you can still learn from and review those questions. So it's not like...
It's not a complete waste of time to do the experimental section in the Demon because it's just another section.
The only reason I favor 3/4 is that I want to make sure people review their tests. And the longer they are, the less likely they are to go through them.
That's why we mostly recommend don't even do full tests, just do a section instead.
Yep.
Because if you do one section, you might sit down and immediately review it. And that procrastination that people do where they do a test and then they're like, oh, I'll watch some TV, relax a little bit. I'll come back and review it later.
Yeah, then it's like 9 or 10 p.m. and they're like, well, okay, I can't do it now.
Well, I'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then tomorrow it's like, oh, well, I mean, I don't really even remember what I was thinking on those questions. So
yeah, D makes sense now. It's so obvious. It's like, well, okay, what'd you do that all for? What was the point of that exercise?
Right. Yeah. That's why for Nicole and others, we do want you to do practice tests, throughout your process. Mm-hmm. There's no point like putting it off. You should just do a practice test.
Yeah.
But you've got to block out the time to review that test if you're going to do it. That's the important part. All right. Want to wrap it up there?
Yeah. Email daily@lsatdemon.com if you'd like to ask us a question or share some LSAT or law school admissions news. Thanks for listening.